videos on this, and there's a couple things I didn't explain well, and I'm going to try to clarify that. So you're going to want to determine how far from the end of your tubing to the inside of your bend is going to be. And I'll grab this off the ground real quick and show you. So on this one that I've already done, the inside of your bend will be right here. So you want to determine how far from the inside of that bend to the end of your pipe is. And mine was solely based on getting 2 of these out of a 10-foot piece of tubing so that I didn't waste material. I think I got it down to about 2 inches that I'm wasting. And also I wanted to increase the height. I'm going to use 5-foot tubing on the side of the trailer, and this will be on top of it, and this will be the top of the trailer. And a tarp will be over there. I'm going to have a custom tarp made, but I was just trying not to waste material, so it's going to be 5 foot tall, and I want it to be a little bit taller, and this will make it like 5 foot and 5 3/4 inches or so. But you want to determine that. That'll be the first mark you make whenever you're cutting this. Like I said, this is 7 inches. So stone's not very sharp. So you want to get your first mark on there. Been using the square to just put that first mark on there. Alright, so you're just going to mark these 3 sides, the bottom, top, and the front. And then the other thing that nobody explained in any of their videos, the second mark is going to be half the width of your tubing. So this is 1-inch tubing, it's going to be ½ an inch. And it'll be towards the end of the pipe, or the tubing. So I've just been throwing my square up there, marking ½ an inch. So nobody explained that. I watched a lot of videos. They just the way I figured it was, it looked like the guy was cutting 2-inch square tubing, and he had like a square that was 1 inch wide, and he just made that second mark the width of that square. And I thought, well, if that square tubing and he's using a 1 inch wide ruler, then you make that mark half the width of your tubing, and it's worked out pretty good for me so far. And then the next thing you're going to do is, if I can find it, I got a piece. I was using it as a makeshift hammer earlier, but you need something round. On 2-inch square tubing, they were getting away with like a cutoff wheel, like a 4.5 inch cutoff wheel. But on this 1-inch square tubing, I didn't like the radius that it was giving me, so I just found this piece of round chunk of metal. I think I don't know what it came on, a whole pecan cracker or something at one time, I think. But not move over here for this one. This one. But you get your round piece on there to get your radius, and you position it just about like this. You want to, however you position it, you're going to want to do that the same way all the way around, which it never turns out perfect, and one side will be fit up really well and the other side not so much, but you just got to do a little filling. You got to fill it in with your weld a little bit. So that is one end. You'll do the other end exactly the same, 7 inches from the end and 1/2 inch to the next mark, and then a radius towards the outside. And then when you go to do the other side, you have to do the 180 degrees, the other side identical. Flip your tubing 180 degrees, and it'll put these marks right where you need them. You put your radius on there. I'll just pause the video right here, and then I'll start up when I'm starting my cuts. But that's the important thing. Half the width of your tubing, and your radius needs to be as close to the same on both sides as possible to get the same exact fit. And then this line right here is really important, because that's going to determine how wide the inside of these bends are. And so far, that's been the most important cut for me. And I've got 2 out of 3 that turned out perfect. The third one wasn't so much that any of this was wrong, it was the fact that I accidentally added 2 inches to the entire thing, so I had to cut it 2 inches out of the middle and weld it back together. All right, now with the grinder, come over here. With this grinder, when you go to do that radius, you want to push, when you're making that radius, you want to push towards the inside, because all this is just material that's going to be removed anyways to make that bend. So you're going to want to follow that radius real smooth and rotate towards the inside, so that you make this part rounded. The inside doesn't really matter so much, but I start by cutting these lines, these 2 lines, and then making that radius. And I don't even focus on cutting all the way through. I'll take pliers and I'll bend it out, and then I'll take the cutoff wheel and do some polishing after I get all that removed and kind of rounding up and clean up that surface. So I'll go ahead and start cutting this. You're just going to plunge, you're going to make a plunge cut along the top right here, so that all these pieces are disconnected. And they'll still kind of hang up in there. Like I said, you got to take pliers back to it. And don't worry if you go a little bit beyond either side of this, because you can fill that in with weld. So you can see I went a little bit beyond towards the inside, but I'll fill that in with weld and it won't be a problem. Just pause it right there. Alright, now once you have all your cuts made, you'll just get in there and pluck out your pieces like like these corner pieces, they're, like I said, you're not gonna really get to cut all the way through them because of the radius, trying to radius it with a 4.5 inch cutoff wheel. I thought about trying to use a jigsaw or something that could better radius it. This one actually I didn't cut very, kind of messed up. I ain't cut deep enough, but you'll be able to bend it and you'll get it to snap off eventually. All right, so you can see it's radiused. It just needs to be polished up. You can get a good. See, my corner pieces are a little bit different size, so I may have a little bit of a wide gap on one of those radiuses, but I'll get it fixed up. And you just gotta weld a gap sometimes. You gotta be decent at that. Especially on 1-inch tubing. I think if I was doing 2-inch tubing, I could just about get this perfect. But this 1-inch tubing, trying to radius it with a 4.5 inch angle grinder, probably your best bet would be to get a jigsaw and do that radius and get you a little circular template and mark it so that you always got your radius in the exact same spot. But there's that side. I'm gonna cut this side out and I'll show you how to square that and tack it up and get it ready. All right, get a good look at that. All right, once you get a decent radius right here, then you're going to take your metal and you're going to bend it out like this and then bend it back in. Now, then you're going to square it and you're going to figure out, like me, that you got to take a little bit off the inside. See, so the first one I did, first and second one I had to take a little bit off this inside to get it to come back to square. You can see the gap. And then the third one I did was perfect. So it probably just has to do with me cutting a little narrower than, or see, you can see I cut on the inside of my line. You can see the chalk line still there. That's probably what it is. I cut, left a 16th or a 32nd, but I mean, that's all it takes to throw you out a square. So I'll go back, I'll polish that. All right, that's what it'll look like before you get this thing tacked up. I mean, that's a pretty decent fit up. I had to take my flapper wheel to take off a little bit on this inside, and it kind of domed it a little bit, but that gap will be nothing. I'll go from the corner where the metal's thickest and I'll fill that gap in, no problem. I'm not sure what the other side looks like yet, but I think it's going to be pretty decent all the way around on that one. But basically, I'll hold the square in there. I'll take the MIG welder and I'll put a tack on this side. I'll flip it over and I'll tack it, and then I'll show you another trick here in a second. But don't get crazy too soon. Just get you a tack on there. Something to hold it. Flip it over. Check your fit on the other side. See, I didn't radius quite as much right there, but once again, that won't be a big deal to tack or to fill. Ah, I broke my tack. That's why you just tack. It was a little twisted and ended up breaking that tack to straighten it out. But I want these to be right, because if they're not right, then when I make the fit up over there on the trailer, everything, the joints are going to look a little twisted and goofy, and just don't want that. Yeah, actually, I didn't even break the tack that I can see. But I'm not tired of my cheap welding. I'll run partial beads on here, and then I'll show you a trick. All right. When I got the metal hot, I noticed that this part was wanting to twist one way or the other. But while I got the metal hot, I'll put it in the vise, kind of like that or so, and I'll crank down on it pretty good, and that'll straighten this up with this. That way we're not having these things all bow-legged and stuff whenever we go to weld them on. I'll run about half of the weld that I'm going to on each side, just so that it's hot whenever I put it in here. Let it set for a second, let this vise act as a heat sink, draw some of the heat out so that the metal relaxes where it needs to be. And then I'll get the work in position, and I'll get the final weld on there and polish it. All right, you can zoom in on that real quick. That was a pretty big gap right there around that corner. And this is flux core wire, so everything just looks nasty. I'm running it's really thin gauge stuff, so it kind of blows through a lot of it. I've got it turned down just about as low as I can and still run a bead. But This is all going to be polished and cleaned up anyways. But then when it's real hot, after I get that final weld on it, before I go and grind it off, polish it, I'll go ahead and stick it back in here just to make sure it doesn't warp and get crazy, because this is going to be critical that these things are as square as possible when I go to start putting these on the trailer.
Oops.
Like I said, so far this has worked pretty good to keep them square. And I would rather them come in a little bit more than I would go out. So I'd rather them be less than 90 than more. But once it's polished, it'll look pretty clean.
Of course, my phone died, so we didn't get to video the rest, but I was just going to show you what a couple of these finished look like. So that's what it's looked like after he finished welding it, polishing them off, grinding them down. Pretty nice and smooth now. It's got the inside polished. Oops. So on these, he would have used a grinder, like a metal brush. I don't know if it's called a polishing brush or what the proper term for it is, but one of those big heavy duty metal brushes. But that's that. And he's got a couple of these welded on here. I don't want to show you too much of the trailer yet. That's going to be for the next video. But he's got the back and the front part welded on there. And part 3 will be coming out soon.